Did Kandi Burruss just snap on live? Or did something deeply personal surface when she least expected it? Because what viewers witnessed wasn't loud, wasn't chaotic, and wasn't planned. It was subtle, and somehow even more unsettling. One moment, Kandi was calm, confident, completely in control, just another regular live session with fans. And then, a name was mentioned. Porsha Williams. Almost instantly, something shifted. Her expression changed. Her energy slowed. And the room, even through a screen, felt heavy. Fans watching knew something was off, even if they couldn't explain why. The pauses lingered longer than usual. She reread comments instead of responding. Her voice stayed steady, but the tension underneath it was impossible to ignore. This wasn't a rant. This wasn't a meltdown. It felt like restraint, the kind people show when emotions hit too close to home. And that's when the comment section exploded. Because just hours earlier, quiet rumors involving Kandi's husband had already started circulating online. Nothing confirmed, nothing concrete, just whispers, the kind that usually fade away. Except this time, the timing felt different. Now fans are asking, was this just coincidence? Or did that live moment reveal more than words ever could? Because when reactions come before explanations, the internet never looks away. The moment didn't explode the way people expect drama to. There was no raised voice, no accusations flying across the screen, no outright confrontation. And yet, that's exactly why it landed so hard. Kandi Burruss was live, doing what she has done countless times before, engaging with fans, reading comments, keeping things light and controlled. At first, everything felt normal, comfortable, familiar. But then the conversation shifted, and viewers immediately sensed it. When Porsha Williams' name entered the chat, the air seemed to change. Kandi didn't react the way viewers were used to seeing. There was no quick joke to deflect the moment, no confident smile to brush it off. Instead, she paused. Not for a second, but long enough for people to notice. Long enough for the comment section to quiet down before speeding up again. Her eyes dropped to the screen, scanning comments more carefully than before, as if choosing every next move with intention. For longtime fans, that alone was enough to feel unsettling. Kandi has built a reputation on composure. She's handled conflict publicly before, messy conversations, awkward questions, uncomfortable rumors, and she usually does it with clarity and confidence. This time felt different. Her tone remained calm, but the emotional weight underneath it felt heavier. It wasn't anger that viewers picked up on. It was restraint, the kind that shows up when someone is trying not to say too much. Almost immediately, viewers began connecting dots. Earlier that same day, quiet whispers had started making their way through social media, vague, carefully worded, and mostly speculative. They involved Kandi's husband and uneasy connections that fans hadn't previously focused on this closely. On a normal day, those kinds of rumors come and go without much impact. But the timing made people pause. Because seeing Kandi's reaction unfold on live, so close to when those whispers started circulating, made the coincidence feel heavier. As the live continued, Kandi's pacing noticeably slowed. She reread comments. She skipped questions. She redirected conversations instead of leaning into them. None of it was dramatic, and that's what unsettled people most. It wasn't chaos. It looked like control. Control that felt deliberate, almost protective. Viewers began filling the comment section with questions laid in concern rather than excitement. People weren't trying to stir drama at first. They were trying to understand what they were watching. Clips from the live started circulating almost instantly. Short screen recordings popped up across platforms, focusing less on what was said and more on how it was said. Facial expressions, pauses, body language. Fans began dissecting moments frame by frame, not because Kandi confirmed anything, but because her reaction didn't match the belief that nothing was wrong. The silence between words felt louder than any explanation could have been. That's when conversations started shifting from curiosity to debate. Some viewers pushed back hard, reminding others that reading into body language can be misleading. Going live can be exhausting. Comments move fast. Pressure from constant scrutiny is real. Not every pause means something deeper. And yet, others couldn't shake the feeling that this moment felt too specific to dismiss. Too intentional. Especially knowing how skilled Kandi is at navigating uncomfortable situations publicly. What escalated things further was what didn't happen afterward. The live ended quietly. No clarifying tweet followed. No dismissal. No attempt to downplay the moment. For hours, then longer, there was nothing. In online culture, silence rarely stays neutral. It becomes part of the story whether anyone intends it to or not. And in this case, silence opened the door wider for interpretation. As more people revisited the footage, memories started resurfacing. Past interviews, old conversations, casual remarks that once felt harmless but now appeared different when viewed through this new lens. Fans didn't find proof, but they found context. And context, even without confirmation, can begin shaping belief. People weren't asking what had been proven anymore. They were asking what felt consistent. At the center of it all was the emotional shift viewers believed they had witnessed. Not an outburst, not a meltdown, but something quieter and more personal. The kind of moment that doesn't feel performative. The kind that makes people wonder if something private briefly surfaced in a space meant for public conversation. Whether that interpretation is fair or not became the dividing line between audiences. Some expressed deep concern for Kandi, feeling that the internet was intruding too far into something that might be deeply personal. Others argued that once things unfold publicly, reactions will follow, especially when emotions feel real. Both sides watched the same footage and walked away with completely different conclusions. And that alone showed how powerful perception had become in this situation. As hours passed, attention didn't fade. It intensified, not because new information emerged, but because uncertainty lingered. The longer nothing was clarified, the more that live moment stood on its own, carrying weight it may never have intended to hold. Viewers weren't chasing confirmation at this point. They were watching behavior, timing, absence, tone, and quietly, a question began settling into the background of every discussion. If this was nothing, why did it feel like something? By the end of the day, what fans were reacting to wasn't a scandal, it was a moment. A moment that felt unexpectedly human, unguarded, and unresolved. And once a story reaches that stage, it doesn't need facts to survive. It feeds on interpretation, repetition, and the emotional response of those watching. This wasn't closure. It felt like the first crack, and everyone was watching to see what would come next. By the next day, the conversation had grown louder, not because anything new had been said, but because nothing had. The absence of clarification became the most discussed detail of all. In spaces where reactions are usually immediate and narratives are quickly corrected or dismissed, the lack of response stood out sharply. Even viewers who initially brushed the moment off as nothing began revisiting it with fresh eyes. What people started focusing on wasn't just the live anymore. It was everything surrounding it. Fans began paying attention to timing. When certain posts appeared, when others didn't, who stayed active online and who seemed to pull back, even slightly. None of it was dramatic on its own. But combined with the tension already surrounding that live moment, neutral actions stopped feeling neutral. Ordinary behavior felt loaded, even if it never was meant to be. As this shift happened, discussion around Porsha Williams intensified. Not because she had said anything, but because her name had become central to how viewers were interpreting Kandi's reaction. Longtime fans revisited old moments between them, trying to remember interactions that once felt harmless. Jokes, side comments, shared scenes that didn't raise alarms at the time. Now, viewed through a different lens, those moments were being re-evaluated. To some, it felt unfair. To others, it felt inevitable. Social media thrives on pattern finding, and once people believe they've spotted one, everything begins to align around it. Screenshots resurfaced. Quotes were repeated. None of it proved anything, but it didn't need to. The story had moved beyond proof and into emotional logic. For many viewers, what mattered was that Kandi's reaction didn't feel random. Meanwhile, others pushed back harder. They argued that this level of analysis crossed a line. That reading intention into pauses and expressions creates narratives people can't control once they take hold. They reminded everyone that public figures are still human, tired, distracted, protective of their private lives, and that not every moment needs to mean more than it does. But the divide was already forming. Supporters replayed the live looking for signs of overwhelm and stress. Critics replayed the same footage searching for restraint and hesitation. The same content fueled opposite conclusions. That's when it became clear this was no longer about what happened on the screen. It was about what people brought with them when they watched it. As attention grew, creator commentary started entering the conversation. Not aggressive, not definitive, but cautious breakdowns analyzing tone, pacing, and timing. Even when wrapped in disclaimers, this commentary carried weight. Each retelling reinforced the feeling that something significant had occurred, even without new information. Repetition alone gave the moment permanence. What complicated everything further was the emotional realism of the reaction itself. If Kandi had laughed it off, the story might have ended there. If she had addressed it directly, the narrative could have stabilized. Instead, viewers were left with something incomplete, an emotional fragment without explanation. And fragments tend to grow larger when people try to fill in the blanks themselves. The focus slowly shifted away from facts altogether. Discussions became centered on intent, on what someone would or wouldn't do if nothing was wrong, on how people behave when they are protecting something close to them. Speculative language took over. It feels like anyone would react this way if you don't pause like that unless. Logic was replaced by intuition. Some fans admitted they felt uncomfortable with how believable the speculation had started to sound, even without confirmation. Others felt uneasy for an entirely different reason, because they weren't sure whether they were witnessing truth surface or watching a rumor spiral simply because silence left room for it. And still, nothing was said. No statement surfaced to reframe the moment. No clarifying comment reset expectations. The live remained the only reference point, replayed endlessly, carrying heavier meaning each time. In online culture, silence doesn't pause a conversation, it shapes it. Quietly, the story reached a new phase. It stopped being about whether rumors were true and became about whether the situation had passed the point where truth even mattered. Because once perception settles into place, correcting it can take more effort than letting it grow unchecked. Viewers began wondering how long this quiet could last. How long before someone addressed it directly? How long before a reaction, any reaction, shifted the narrative again? Anticipation replaced curiosity. People weren't scrolling casually anymore. They were waiting. What unsettled many wasn't scandal. It was the sense that something deeply personal might be unfolding in public without consent or clarity. And yet, the attention didn't fade. It intensified, because uncertainty has a way of tightening its grip when left unresolved. By the end of this phase, one thing was undeniable. Whatever happened on that live had crossed a line between moment and memory. It wasn't disappearing. It wasn't fading into the usual cycle of gossip that comes and goes within hours. It stayed. And as it stayed, the pressure built, not just on the story itself, but on the people at its center. Because eventually, silence stops feeling like distance. It starts feeling like a choice. By the time the situation reached its third phase, the tone online had shifted in a way that felt unmistakable. Conversations were no longer reactive or speculative in bursts. They had become steady, persistent, and expectation-driven. Viewers weren't asking whether something happened anymore. They were waiting to see when something would be acknowledged. Every public move felt magnified. A post that might have once gone unnoticed was suddenly scrutinized for timing. A caption that felt neutral was read for subtext. Even moments of inactivity became talking points. In an environment already saturated with interpretation, neutrality stopped feeling neutral. It felt intentional, whether it was meant to be or not. Kandi Burruss remained under the heaviest spotlight. Fans noticed that while nothing about her behavior was overt, everything felt measured. Her presence appeared controlled, professional, almost guarded. Supporters saw strength in that composure, arguing that she was protecting herself from unnecessary noise. Others interpreted the same restraint differently, believing it suggested knowledge she wasn't ready to share. Once again, the same behavior validated opposite conclusions. Discussion around Porsha Williams followed a similar pattern. Her name had become tied to the narrative not through statements, but through framing. Viewers tracked mentions, absences, and the way conversations unfolded around her without her being directly involved. That distance only added to the ambiguity. Silence, on both sides, began to feel like a participant rather than an absence. At this stage, the story no longer needed momentum to survive. It had reached self-sustainment. Each new discussion referenced the same core moment, layering interpretation over repetition until the original live felt almost secondary to the meaning built around it. Memory became selective, shaped by whichever version the viewer believed most. Speculation grew sharper, not louder. People no longer shouted conclusions, they suggested them. Carefully phrased comments implied intention without naming it. Phrases like "anyone paying attention can see" or "this explains a lot" spread quickly, giving certainty without committing to accusation. This softer certainty proved more powerful than overt claims, because it invited agreement rather than resistance. At the same time, discomfort began to surface among observers. Some questioned whether the story had strayed too far from its origin, a single moment of visible emotion, and grown into something heavier than it deserved to be. They wondered if the pressure to interpret had eclipsed the humanity of the people involved. Those voices, however, struggled to gain ground in a narrative driven by anticipation rather than balance. The idea of a private confrontation quietly took hold in collective imagination, not as a claim, but as a possibility repeated often enough to feel plausible. Viewers imagined difficult conversations behind closed doors, moments of realization, emotional recalibration. No one could confirm any of it, yet those imagined scenes shaped how people understood what they believed they had witnessed. Emotional storytelling filled the gaps that facts left open. As this imagined context expanded, earlier material was revisited again, interviews, quotes, remarks made long before the live. Nothing in them served as confirmation. But when placed alongside silence, they felt weightier. Ordinary statements began to feel loaded. Casual boundaries discussed in the past now appeared oddly relevant. Context reshaped recollection, allowing old moments to support new beliefs. A quieter realization crept in for many viewers. Even if clarity arrived, it might not undo the version of events already forming in public consciousness. Narratives built on feeling are not easily dismantled by explanation. Once belief settles, correction often sounds defensive, no matter how factual it is. This awareness created a tension of its own. People weren't just waiting for truth, they were aware of how little space there was left for it to land cleanly. Whoever spoke next would not simply respond, they would redefine the story, whether they intended to or not. The longer anticipation stretched, the heavier it became. Silence no longer felt neutral or protective. It felt like delay. And delay, in a story this emotionally charged, tends to breed expectation rather than understanding. By this point, the situation had fully transitioned from moment to narrative. It wasn't about what had been seen anymore, it was about how it was being remembered, framed, and repeated. The original live clip had become symbolic, standing in for questions that reached far beyond that evening. For some viewers, the discomfort was no longer about gossip or drama. It was about watching perception harden in real time, fueled by attention rather than clarity. For others, it felt like watching something unspoken slowly surface, drawn out not by words, but by reaction and restraint. And still, no one spoke. That silence, once subtle, now carried weight of its own. Because when a story reaches this stage, it no longer asks whether something happened. It asks what happens next. And whatever that is, it won't arrive in a vacuum. It will collide with expectations already set. And those expectations are louder now than the truth itself. Now this is where the story stops being just something you watch, and starts becoming something you're part of. Because at this point, the question isn't just what happened on that live, it's why that moment has stayed with so many people. Stories come and go online every day, yet this one refuses to fade. Something about the timing, the reaction, and the silence afterward has made viewers pause and really think. And when that happens collectively, it usually means people are sensing something deeper, whether they can explain it or not. So now we want to hear from you. Based on everything you've seen, the shift in energy, the pauses, the way the moment unfolded, how did it feel to you? Do you believe this was simply a misunderstood emotional moment that spiraled online? Or do you think that Liv revealed something Kandi wasn't ready to address publicly yet? More importantly, why do you think this situation feels different from other celebrity rumors that disappear within hours? Is it the lack of response? The timing? Or the fact that reactions sometimes feel louder than words ever could? Drop your honest thoughts in the comments. You don't need to claim facts, just share what your gut tells you after watching everything unfold. Respectful conversations are where the clearest insights often appear, and different perspectives matter here. If this story caught your attention, make sure to like the video. It helps push this discussion to others who are closely watching what's happening and encourages more people to share thoughtful takes rather than rushed conclusions. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Because whether this story fades quietly or takes an unexpected turn, any reaction or response could change everything. And when that happens, you won't want to miss the next chapter. This conversation isn't over. It's just waiting for what comes next.